We all have that uncle who still lives in the basement who says things like, well, Big Pharma, they've cured cancer years ago. They got cures for all kind of stuff. They locked that stuff away in a vault underneath a mountain in Colorado that's never going to get out. They don't want to cure you. They want to keep you sick. Now, there may very well be a reason or list of reasons that that uncle still lives in the basement. But that uncle is onto something, but the truth of the conspiracy is much more subtle and nuanced than he has tried to lead you to believe. In this video, I'm going to tell you about a cure for hepatitis C, which is real and has a greater than 90% cure rate. And then the pharmaceutical company who marketed this cure, and then what the bank that was financing this big pharmaceutical house said about that, and the message that was taken away from that statement by this huge multinational bank, that not only this pharmaceutical corporation took away from that, but I guarantee you all other big pharma corporations took away from that statement as well. I'm Dr. Ken Bierry, family physician. Let's talk about why they make more money by keeping us sick. So back in 2014, a pharmaceutical house by the name of Gilead put on the market, got FDA approval for Harvoni, and they brought it to market in the EU, in Canada, in the United States, and it had a greater than 90% cure rate for hepatitis C. Astounding, miraculous. Every family doctor and every other doctor on the planet rejoiced. Here's a cure for a chronic medical condition that previously we had no cure for. We just had to treat the symptoms. It became obvious during the early usage of Harvoni that it absolutely did cure hepatitis C. And you would think every human on the planet would be happy about that. But one of the humongous multinational investment banks actually said the quiet part out loud. Goldman Sachs said in a statement, now, you know, regular guy would say to another guy in this situation is, hey, dummy, you understand you're curing everybody. Therefore, there'll soon be no market. Therefore, you'll soon stop making money. I mean, it's great you cured people and all. Yeah, whoop-de-doo. But let's think about the long-term investment picture here. If you want to keep your stock price high, if you want to keep making billions and billions of dollars off a drug, then you really shouldn't investigate, experiment, and come up with drugs that cure stuff. You should just come up with a daily pill or a weekly injection or a once-a-month infusion that treats, that manages things. That's where the big money is. But that's not what Goldman Sachs said. They used much more august and articulate language. Goldman Sachs said to Gilead and to everyone else who was listening, and I promise you, everyone else was listening, because if you can't get startup capital, funding capital, investment capital, long-term capital, then you no longer have a pharmaceutical company. Goldman Sachs said, the potential to deliver one-shot cures is one of the most attractive aspects of gene therapy, genetically engineered cell therapy, and gene editing. However, such treatments offer a very different outlook with regard to recurring revenue versus chronic therapies. While this proposition carries tremendous values for patients and society, it could represent a challenge for genomic medicine developers looking for sustained cash flow. And indeed, Goldman Sachs was correct. Money spent on treatments for hepatitis C peaked in 2015 and have been coming down every year since, which is wonderful for people who previously had hepatitis C and who are now cured. Also for their families, also for all the doctors who used to pull the hair out trying to manage hepatitis C as it just got slowly worse. But it did not make the sustained billions and billions of dollars that people who invest in stocks are interested in. It didn't make the billions of dollars in long-term revenue that investment banks are interested in. So basically, all the money at the top, all the money in the middle, the money that actually pushes forward pharmaceutical research had very little interest in this. Now, you would think that CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, you'd think all these guys would be so interested in this story, and you'd think they'd come up with an update story every 6 months. And they would not let this go until Goldman Sachs said, oh, we're sorry that we said that. and we're sorry that we tainted the big pharma pool by saying such a terrible thing. We want them to come up with cures, and we'll actually fund cures. We don't want to fund just chronic management of chronic medical diseases. But you haven't seen any of those stories, have you? You haven't heard of any updates. This story kind of went down the memory hole because Goldman Sachs made it very clear that if you invest in cures, then you're wasting our money, and we're not going to be interested in future things like that. Now, you might think that the newspapers and the journals and the articles would never stop, but Big Pharma funds all of them. Big Pharma has billions of dollars in an advertising budget that they can basically hold over CNN and Fox News and everybody else's head and say, hey, if you give us bad press, we'll pull our ads. How about that? And then you can figure out how you're going to pay your reporters and all your other ancillary staff. So everybody knows that the fix is in. The big banking houses do not want to bankroll cures. Therefore, Big Pharma's not going to work and spend billions of dollars to come up with cures and then lock them in a vault under a mountain in Colorado. That'd be dumb. That's a waste of money. They're just not going to do research that might potentially lead to cures for other chronic medical conditions. Big pharma corporations have no incentive to develop and market drugs that have a greater than 90% cure rate for chronic medical conditions. Because for them, as pessimistic as this may sound, chronic medical conditions that are chronically progressive, that you live with for decades and decades, that is a cash cow. They can sell you a pill a day for the next 40 years instead of selling you a 12-week treatment regimen that cures your condition, and then they don't make any more money off you. So your uncle's sort of right, but it's much more subtle than your uncle understands. It's coming from the big banks, big pharma. They all know that there's no long-term billions and billions of dollars to be made if they keep curing chronic diseases. So my prediction as a country boy from the hills of Tennessee is that there will magically not be any more miraculous cures for chronic medical conditions. There will only be new and updated treatments and therapies and management for chronic medical conditions. And now this may piss you off. It pisses me off. But unless you have several hundred billions worth of dollars laying around, your opinion doesn't really matter, and neither does mine. So basically, all medical research going into the future based on this is going to be looking for chronic therapy, chronic management, a daily pill, a weekly infusion, once every 2-week injection. These are the kind of things that Big Pharma is going to be looking for because they see the writing on the wall of the bank. We're not interested in cures. Okay, and I'm going to leave you with 2 quotes that I think are very relevant about this that may actually blow you away. The first is from Marcia Angell, and she used to be the editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine. And she said, "It is simply no longer possible to believe much of the clinical research that is published, or to rely on the judgment of trusted physicians or authoritative medical guidelines. I take no pleasure in this conclusion, which I reached slowly and reluctantly over my 2 decades as an editor." And then another quote from Arnold Relman, who was also a former editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine. He said, "The medical profession is being bought by the pharmaceutical industry, not only in terms of the practice of medicine, but also in terms of teaching and research. The academic institutions of this country are allowing themselves to be the paid agents of the pharmaceutical industry. I think it's disgraceful." I agree with both of these statements, but I think that although Big Pharma definitely deserves a role in the blame, the big financing banks probably deserve some applause as well for their part in this ongoing train wreck that is modern healthcare. This is exactly why years ago I decided to stop being a drug pusher for Big Pharmacy's drugs and try to figure out a way to help people reverse chronic conditions by changing their diet, by changing their lifestyle. And indeed, I think that I and many others in this space have stumbled upon some cures. Now, we're also not going to make billions of dollars from touting these cures, but I'm happy to do that because I'm not here to make $1 million. I'm here to make 1 million people healthier. That's my job as a doctor, and that's what I'm trying to do. So I've got all the links to relevant news articles and research down in the show notes below. If you have a friend or a neighbor who has hepatitis C, you should probably send them a text and say, hey, Bubba, you know they got a cure for that, right? Go talk to your doctor about that. There's a link to the cure down in the show notes below. This is Dr. Bierry. I'll see you next time.